John totally beat me to it. I'd been planning this video for a while, but yesterday he hit the daring fireball publish button on his thoughts about the rumored new MacBook before I could even get mine online. And they were great. So much so I almost didn't put mine out. Almost. Thing was, the topic still nagged at me. John covered a lot of the possibilities, but what Apple's doing has never interested me as much as why the company is doing it. And that, I think, is still worth talking about. Hey, I'm Rene Ritchie. Welcome back to Vector. Let's do this. If you're not up to speed on all the new MacBook rumors, let me timeline it for you real quick. Back on March 1, on the Vector podcast, one of the best industry analysts in, well, the industry, Ben Beharin, laid out the value prop for a new MacBook Air.
There's a slot that I think if Apple chose to could seriously rain on the PC OEM's parade if they brought updates to the MacBook Air with like Retina, for example. If all they did was update the Air with Retina and some modern specs and left and priced it around like $899, I mean, they would take share like it's no one's business. It would really, really disrupt PC sales in a significant way.
On March 3rd, financial analyst and supply chain information exfiltrator Kuo-Ming Chi published a research note saying, "We expect Apple to roll out the new MacBook Air with a lower price tag in the second quarter of 2018. On March 7, Taiwan's Economic Daily News chimed in with, "The 13-inch low-priced MacBook will fall between $799 and $899, down from $100 to $200. It further implied that after seeing the growth of the less expensive 9.7-inch iPad in 2017, Apple was eager to see what a less expensive MacBook, 6.1-inch iPhone, and maybe even HomePod could do in their respective markets." The occasionally accurate Digitimes added, "The 13.3-inch ASI panels for the new notebook features the same resolution as Apple's 13.3-inch MacBook Pro at 2560 by 1600. Then, on March 23rd, Bloomberg said it was still coming, but put a delay in everybody's rumor fun. A new cheaper MacBook laptop is in the works and likely destined to replace the MacBook Air at a price less than $1,000, but it probably won't be ready in time for next week, the people said, those people being familiar with the matter. Apple's March education event came and went, ditto WWDC. Even a July MacBook Pro update with nary an additional peep from the MacBook rumor gallery. Not until August 15th, when financial analyst firm TrendForce said, "Apple already released a new MacBook Pro at the start of the quarter and will release a new MacBook Air at the end of the quarter." August 17th, Digitimes was back saying the new MacBook would be powered by Intel's Kaby Lake refresh, but also be well over $1,000, which, no longer sounded very entry-level at all. Apple is scheduled to roll out its entry-level MacBook series featuring Intel's 14nm Kaby Lake processor in September's product launch conference. The model is expected to be priced at US $1,200 according to industry sources. On August 20th, Bloomberg also came back with some additional information on what it was still calling a low-cost MacBook. The new laptop will look similar to the current MacBook Air, but will include thinner bezels around the screen. The display, which will remain about 13 inches, will be a higher resolution Retina version that Apple uses on other products, the people said. Again, the people being familiar with the matter. And that brings us to where we are today. But I'm going to jump back just one more time to provide some context for where we're going next. Stick with me. This is important. Once upon an Intel transition, Apple had the original MacBook. It was white plastic or black if you coughed up an extra $100, and it was good. It was fine. Then, in 2008, Steve Jobs took to the same stage he'd announced the original iPhone on just a year earlier and pulled what looked like magic out of a manila envelope.
This is it. Let me take it out here. This is the new MacBook Air.
It was the world's thinnest laptop with a 13.3-inch display, full-sized MacBook keyboard, single USB-A port tucked inside a Millennium Falcon-like hatch, no optical drive, the first real multi-touch trackpad, and It started at $1,700. I had one. I used it for almost a year. It was expensive. It was compromised. It felt like the future, but couldn't always quite keep up with the present. At least not yet. Not until 2011, when Steve Jobs went back to the Mac, and Apple went next generation on the Air.
It's one of the most amazing things we've ever created. It is our new MacBook Air, and we think it's the future of notebooks.
Rumor had it Steve walked into a meeting with the Mac team one day, dropped the iPad on the table, said what it can do, and asked why the Mac couldn't do the same. Instant on. Great battery life, amazing standby life, completely solid-state storage, and even thinner and lighter to be even more mobile. So, that's what the Mac team delivered, but along with even more computing conveniences. 2 USB-A ports instead of just one, and no longer tucked away. A Thunderbolt 2 port, an SDXC card reader. But the biggest news was the price, $12.99, at least at first. By 2014, it dropped to just $9.99. Steve Jobs called it the future of notebooks, and it was. The template Intel and every other manufacturer raced to ultra copy as the Ultrabook. It set the standard for a generation. And yeah, I'm totally ignoring the 11-inch model for now. That was $9.99 at launch, but it dropped to $8.99 in 2014 before being end-of-lined in 2016. At $9.99, the 13-inch MacBook Air literally replaced the original MacBook, becoming not just Apple's ultra-mobile Mac, but its entry-level Mac as well. Then, in 2015, Apple brought the MacBook back.
When you're out in the wild, you will see Macs everywhere now. They're in schools. They're in businesses. They're in coffee shops and airports. We challenged ourselves to reinvent the notebook. And we did it. Here it is. It is unbelievable. Can you even see it? I can't even feel it. There it goes.
At 12 inches, it was even thinner and lighter than Air. In fact, rumor has it, Apple briefly considered calling it the MacBook Stealth before thinking better of it. It had a Retina display, the first Force Touch trackpad, the first butterfly and dome switch keyboard. I see you rolling your eyes. The first fanless Intel Core M chipset. Okay, now I'm rolling my eyes. The first gold and eventually rose gold finish. Don't you dare roll your eyes. The first terraced battery and the first USB-C port on a Mac. If the Air was the love child of Mac and iPad, the MacBook was just an iPad in Mac clothing, down to the single port. But Apple's aggressive futurism came at a price. Again, starting at $12.99. Sounds familiar? It wasn't the $17.99 of the original Air, but it wasn't the $9.99 of the then current Air either. Many assumed, myself included, that the price of the MacBook reflected all the new technologies and manufacturing processes that Apple was using to bring the next future of notebooks to market in the then present, and that, like the Air before, the price would drop over time. It just seemed both elegant and inevitable. As the Air replaced the MacBook, so too would the MacBook return to replace the Air. Poetry and symmetry. But the MacBook, which was always expensive to make, just never came down in price. It's still the same $12.99 today it was when it was introduced. And that brings us full circle to the rumors of a new, less expensive MacBook. John, on Daring Fireball, while trying to reconcile all the rumors, listed 3 possible ways Apple could go. 1. Taking the existing MacBook Air and refitting it, Star Trek style, with a Retina display and current generation Intel chipset. That, I think, was the original plan years ago, something Apple considered doing, but the platform may not have been able to handle it back then, or the 12-inch MacBook concept simply sucked all the air, out of the plan. Doing it now might be possible, but it would only fix the inside. The outside is a couple of design generations behind, and, as John points out, it ignores everything Apple has done with the lineup to date, and also ignores the rumors of a thinner bezel. 2. Taking the existing 12-inch MacBook and adding a 13 or 14-inch version to the lineup. Apple seems to like having 2 display options per product, for the most part, and rumors of a 14-inch MacBook predate rumors of a new Air by several years, since the 12-inch version launched, basically. Many MacBook fans are, not surprisingly, even bigger fans of the idea of an even bigger MacBook, and maybe that fits with new rumors that the starting price will be higher. A 14-inch MacBook at $1299 could leave room for a 12-inch MacBook at $999, but that platform hasn't shown much downward elasticity when it comes to pricing at all. It's also yesterday's future, not today's, let alone tomorrow's. 3. Taking the existing 13-inch MacBook Pro without Touch Bar and price dropping it to $999. Apple didn't update the 13-inch MacBook Pro without Touch Bar back in July when the new with Touch Bar models were released. That could have been so it could announce a price drop on stage. After all, when the new MacBook Pro was announced, Apple explicitly positioned the without Touch Bar model as the Retina MacBook Air people had been waiting for. At $1299, that was tough to digest. At $999, maybe not so much. But then again, Apple didn't update any of the other Macs in July, and price dropping an existing product doesn't move things forward the way a new product would. So, I'll add a fourth option to the list. Making an all-new MacBook Air starting at $999, but with options that kick it up to $1299. Let's listen to Tim Cook again.
When you're out in the wild, you will see Macs everywhere now. They're in schools, they're in businesses, they're in coffee shops and airports.
But in the last 3 years, Apple's once industry-shaping non-Pro MacBook line has essentially stood still. They've gotten minor processor updates, but that's it. Meanwhile, Microsoft's Surface might not be pulling in huge numbers, but it's capturing a lot of mind share. Google's Chromebook is hoovering up the low-end market as fast as Google itself uses it to hoover up all of our data. And other vendors, the same ones who raced to copy the MacBook Air with the Ultrabook and catch up with Apple, have more than found their own grooves now. Part of the blame for that falls on Intel for failing again and again to deliver the processors Apple bet its next generation Macs on. Macs that are, not coincidentally, roughly as far behind as Intel's 10nm process itself. But most of the blame has to fall on Apple for being in a position to suffer so egregiously by those delays and not having anything else ready to push out instead. I'm not even talking about switching to ARM. In the age of iPhone X, the MacBook simply no longer looks futuristic, and the Air looks downright anachronistic. Apple's been effectively out of the $999 notebook game for a few years now, and in that time, the competition has gotten confident. It's gotten fierce, it's tasting margins, and it's tasting success. To catch up, much less return to setting the pace, I think Apple has to do more than just a refit, just a resize, just a price drop. I think it has to do what Apple has repeatedly shown it does best. Once again, bring the future of notebooks to market today. Only this time, starting at $999. It's what Apple does so always. It's how one idea, one designer, one engineer can affect how a billion people use and benefit from computers and technology. Look no further than Ken Kashinda's new book, Creative Selection, on Audible. It's in pre-order right now, but I scored an advanced copy, and it's literally absolutely the best book ever made about Apple. It's about how Ken helped Don Melton and his team bring Alexander, the project that became WebKit and the Safari browser, into the world, and then went on to join Purple, the iPhone project, and make the original virtual keyboard. Yeah, autocorrect and all. Go to audible.com/vector or text vector to 500 to get it for free and to really start to understand how Apple iterates and tests its way into creating the products all of us use every day. That's audible.com/vector or text vector to 500 to get started with your free book. Thanks, Audible. Like I said at the top, I'm far less interested in what Apple's doing than why. What problem does it have to solve? For me, and for itself, right now, it's the $999 notebook slot. A new MacBook, a new Air, whatever Apple makes or calls it, it has to field a computer that I'll race to recommend, and people will race to once again show off in coffee shops, schools, airports, and more. That's what I think, at least. Now I want to hear from you. What kind of next generation entry-level MacBook should Apple make? Or should they make one at all? Please hit like, please hit subscribe, and then let me know in the comments. And thank you so much for watching.